Backpack Broadcasting continues to bring you the best original sports content, but now you can get more of the content you love. For as little as $3 a month, you can get access to bonus content, including behind-the-scenes footage and interviews from the Sports Walk, Sideline Stories, or the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast. All this exclusive content comes via Patreon. There are tiered levels of patronage, and each Backpack Broadcasting patron receives exclusive perks. Your support helps Backpack Broadcasting create more of the original content that you love. Visit Backpack Broadcasting's Patreon page and become a patron today. Ain't Hard to Tell podcast, episode 193. Dexter, Henry, Bryan, Fonseca here. You joining us as usual. We thank you for listening. And Bryan, we are back. Second episode for September. We have now kicked off, which I know is going to be weird for some people because I didn't know the reason for this until literally like a year ago. But we're now kicking off officially Hispanic Heritage Month. Starts in the middle of September, goes to the middle of October. And so, Bryan and I, I think for the last couple of years, we've always wanted to do more around Hispanic Heritage Month. We try to do stuff around Women's History Month, Black History Month. We always like to, make sure we focus on those topics and people around that in the world of sports and entertainment. So today, Bryan and I, we have a very special guest.
Yes.
And I'm really excited for this guest to join us here on the podcast. I know. Did you see the pause there? Because I was like, I might mess up the last name, and I don't want to mess up the last name. I'm actually scared because before we started recording, I confirmed what the last name was in terms of the pronunciation.
The X is scaring you. See, this is why I like that you're the play-by-play guy, and I could just stay on the sidelines and be like, yo. And I know how to say the name because you see the shirt. You already know what time it is.
I'm a little nervous because I think it's possible I still might butcher it, and she's going to come on in a second and scold me for butchering it. So we have somebody with this. My producer Greg is trying to tell me I got this, but I'm still nervous. I'm still stalling a little bit, folks, in the way I can. But we have Camille Buxeda, the creative director for WSLAM. Also works for Slam. Did I get it? I got it?
You got it. You got it.
Oh, yes. Okay, I felt like, because you know what, Camille? I felt like you would have to be like, man, his memory is bad. I just told him this like 5 minutes ago. And you messed it up. Okay, I got it. Camille, representing Puerto Rico, like Bryan. Right. I believe, Bryan, is this the first time this is not our first Puerto Rican guest that's been on the show beside you, right? Because we also had Julio.
Julio, yeah.
So we had it. Camille's number 2, right?
We ain't have many. I have to look, we've done 193. I would have to look back quite a lot. I would have to look back to 4 years of episodes. You know what I mean? So, I'll get back to you on that. But I do think Camille is second, third, or something like that. Which,
like that.
That means
the first woman?
Definitely that. I'm pretty sure of that. I'm pretty confident about that.
Yeah, because Erica's Dominican.
Yep.
And now that I'm trying to run through all the names in my head, we've had a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. Yeah. And this is why there's like one of this, 2 of this, whatever. It's not one straight line. Like, some of these podcasts, just white people bringing on white people. Like, it's obviously not that over here.
It's not him. But Camille, we are glad to have you. Definitely join us here. We thank you for that. And I think what we just spoke about is a testament of how there is just such a lack of representation of, those in the Hispanic community around sports media. Bryan and I have talked about that a lot, which is why we're definitely happy to have you on here. But I think first and foremost, whenever we have anybody who's on here that works in sports media, doesn't matter who you are, what's your background, we want to get to know you. We want the people to get to know you. Okay. So, I always kind of hate when people put you on the spot and they're like, tell me about yourself. But Camille, tell me about yourself.
So now you're about to do it to me. Appreciate you guys having me on. Started WSLAM about 2 years ago. Prior to that, though, a little bit about me. I was born in Puerto Rico. My dad played professional basketball in Puerto Rico.
Oh, hold on. Wait, I need details. Was it in the BSN league? Did he, go elsewhere, whatever the case may be?
My dad is old. He's 74. Oh God, I'm praying I got that right. He was born in 47. I know that, but he's older, so I know.
You got that right.
74, right? I
OG,
didn't mess up the math
OG,
there? Okay.
Yep, you got it right.
OG. So he played in the league. I mean, I think it was like late six. God, I'm trying to think of like years. So 20 years. He was like in his 20s, so like late 60s, right? Okay.
Yeah, 70s. Yeah.
He was a solid bench warmer. I always tell him that. I tell Pops how it is. No, but he played for a couple of teams over there. I have them written down because I don't know if the ones that I'm thinking of are still existing now.
That's
since
true.
It was so much older.
A lot of them changed, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but that was always a bond for us. I grew up watching basketball games with him and going to different sporting events. He took me to the Expos games when they came to Puerto Rico every year. Yes, I went to Expos games, baseball wise. And we went to a lot of basketball games growing up and all that stuff. So it was always a big tie for me. I moved to Florida around Orlando when I was like 7. And actually, when I moved to the States, I had already started doing gymnastics. Because let me tell you something, my mom is 5'1". My dad had the height, but my mom did not, and I did not get any of those inches until much, much later. So basketball was not in the cards for me, unfortunately. I couldn't do a little Nate Robinson. I didn't have that in me at that time. So
okay.
I ended up.
I tried that too. So,
yeah.
And I'm here.
Exactly. So I ended up, I did gymnastics my whole life. I started in a gym in Guaynabo with a family friend. And then when I moved to the States, I continued. I did it for 16 years, competed professionally. And then I was about to, start the recruiting process and had some unfortunate injuries take me out of that game. But gladly, I was able to go to Florida State and do some, experience one of the best collegiate programs from basketball to football all around, softball, so many incredible teams at that school. And I worked in the athletic department there for about 3.5, 4 years, almost my entire college experience. I was pre-med, so let me just give you a side note. I was pre-med for almost 3 years. I thought I was going to be a doctor. So I was like, oh, the sports things is for fun. This is for fun. I'm just doing this on the side. I'm going to be a doctor. Did quickly realize I did not want to go to medical school. So when I graduated, I knew New York was the place I needed to be. I don't know what happened. Like, I think I came to New York City one time and I was like, this is the spot for me. Like, it's not even a question. Like, I belong in New York City. And I got my master's at NYU in sports business, and interned for the Knicks and the Liberty while in my first year. My second year, I did some freelance work. And then I made my way to the NBA for about a year. And then that's when Slam found me. So it's been a journey for sure with a lot of ups and downs, but very, very blessed to be in the position I'm in today.
There's a bunch of stuff there worth following up on. I will say about the New York thing, it's like, look, our background is kind of our destiny to come up here at some point and relocate, as we were joking about before. I want to know what it's like being a Latina in Tallahassee, Florida, in particular. And I also want to know, well, Dexter, I mean, y'all have an ACC thing going because Dex went to Pitt.
Okay.
Camille, you went to Florida.
I almost went to Pitt.
But...
I almost went to Pitt. I got in.
So why did you make the wrong choice? So
because I ain't trying to pay $40,000 to go out of state like a year. Florida got some real nice in-state tuition programs. Let me just say that.
Fair point. And to be fair to Camille, I am new to the ACC thing. Camille is one of the original OG ACC members. I was in the Big East during my college time, and now we're in the ACC competing. But so that's good. We got a little Pitt Florida State ACC stuff here. Even though Camille made the wrong choice, we're gonna let her rock on that. But I do think Bryan's question is valid because I'll say this, Camille. I have not spent any significant time in Tallahassee.
Yeah.
But I did stop there once in a previous job on a flight. Going to another location in Florida, going to Panama City Beach. for some coverage I was doing there. But I think Brian's question is like, Tallahassee is very interesting. That part of Florida is very interesting. Northern Florida is very interesting, especially for minorities and a Hispanic person like yourself. Yeah. I am with Brian. I want to know all about this. What was it like being there at Florida State in Tallahassee at that time?
Yeah, it's really interesting because, I mean, I would say the same thing of like North Orlando where I was, you know, it was similarly pretty whitewashed. I don't think I recognized it because, like, you know, you're so young, you're just kind of going through it. But like, it's mad funny. Like, my best friend that I met since I was like 4 years old, like this white girl, and I bring her around. She's like, "Oh my God, I'm learning salsa." So I'm out here culturing my friends. But it's funny because you don't recognize it until you get a little older, if I'm honest. And in college is when I really started recognizing, like, damn, like there's really no one around me that, like, you know, moves like me, has similar experiences like me, all of that. You know, at Florida State, I will say there was a lot of people from Miami, So you have a lot of like that South Florida, like, and most of them come from Hispanic parents, but they weren't physically raised where their parents are from, or maybe it's more of like third generation as opposed to like directly being associated with their Latinx cultures. And so it was something that I started recognizing, honestly, if I'm honest with myself, when I was in my early 20s, which was like my junior, senior year of college. And I'm like, and I think that's what drew me to New York so much, is that I was like craving to be with people that are different like myself. Like I wanted to see, you know, not only people that look like me, but that look different than me around me, you know. And like in Tallahassee, you know, the university itself, a lot of the students I worked with, I mean, it's an incredible school that's extremely diverse, the university itself. But when you jump out of those, you know, 4x4 square lines, it's very different, especially when you go closer to the capital or more into the town. But yeah, it's definitely something that I hadn't necessarily given a lot of a thought to until, you know, I started really recognizing it around me. And I was really blessed to have some cool, I mean, incredible people that I went to school with, not only like friends, but people I worked with on student government, and different organizations that were, you know, specific about diversity within the university and highlighting diverse voices. So that was, I think, one of my favorite parts of my time at Florida State, was really being, and I didn't get connected because, like, you know, we all know what freshman and sophomore year like is in college. It's like, oh, I'm all new, I'm by myself, I'm figuring it out. Oh, like, let me, you know, there's no real and then I started guiding myself to those opportunities a little bit more in my latter half of college, which was really, really great.
So I had to ask this because you talked about your dad being a professional basketball player, and that he was is a taller man, and you did not get the height. You got the height pretty much like your mom. And we've had other people on this podcast, and Bryan has brought this up. I'll just, for full disclosure, you've never met me, Camille, in person. I'm 6'2", so I do not occupy that short person space. But Bryan does. Bryan knows about that. So Bryan has always said that being a shorter person, he's always had a certain kind of energy, maybe like a chip on his shoulder energy, that people have always doubted him, thought he couldn't do certain things. Has that been your experience, Camille? Have you had that kind of a smaller person energy that has been around like Bryan, like your Hispanic brother here?
Before she answers that, Camille, first, about 5'8", you know, we'll since Dexter said your height. And also, you say had like that's gone.
You know no, it's not gone. Like, I apologize.
Like that's gonna be there for the rest of my life.
I apologize to Bryan and Camille for. Let's correct this. Bryan still has this energy. Our producer Greg can attest to this energy. So what I want to know is,
you cannot have it.
You're a gymnast. You're a gymnast. That's a sport you chose, as you said, because of your vertical limitations. And I just want to know, did you have? Our producer put some height deficient energy. I didn't say that.
I just saw
Greg, you're not that much taller than me, bro. Like,
I just want to know if Camille has the same energy as her shorter Hispanic brother here on this program.
Well, you know what's funny? I got my inches eventually. They came.
Okay.
I was 4'9" going into high school. Let me preface it with that. I graduated high school like around 5'1". I'm actually like 5'5.5" now. I just hit like my growth spurts super, super late. Gymnastics tends to do that. It actually does stunt growth in all areas. So it's funny you say that, but I don't know if it comes from my height, but I've always had that chip on my shoulder of like, oh, you don't think I can do this? Watch. Oh, you don't think I can be a creative director? Watch. Oh, you don't think, I got the juice? Watch. Like I've always carried that around me. I do think it comes from Puerto Rican culture though, more so than the height thing. Because I think in Puerto Rico, we're all so proud, not only of where we're from, but our community and everything that Puerto Rico stands for. And when you think about the history of the island too, it's a forgotten spot, right? Like it's a spot that's been conquered or, colonized twice and really just kind of left to the side and pushed to the side to deal with itself. And so Puerto Ricans have a lot of like energy and swagger amongst themselves to be like, oh, you think like we're like some forgotten people? No. I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm putting on for our island. So that's a little bit, I think, of where it comes from, because Puerto Rico has a lot of pride of where it's from, especially when you move to the States and so many people just kind of claim it as a, forgotten. Oh, it's just a tropical spot. Like, it's like where I'm going for, nah, like it's a real functioning place that, has just gone through some shit in the past 200 years since it's
I was happy you used the word colonization there. Go ahead, Bryan. I was happy to use that word. Yes.
That is one of my favorite answers that a guest has given on this podcast in the history of this show. Like, I'm not even like exaggerating. Like,
why? Because now you can have a cover for your height deficiency, as Greg said. Your reason for this.
Because there's also, it just peels back some more layers.
That's true. It was very layered. I think Camille's response was very layered, and I can't speak to that. I'm not Puerto Rican, but yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not of all the things that I do professionally, I'm not a creative director because I'm not that sophisticated to come up with an answer like that. Probably off the top of my head.
I suggest this book to people, The War Against All Puerto Ricans. It's such a real, honest history of what Puerto Rico's gone through. I recently read it and was shocked to learn so many things that I didn't know that weren't taught in the history books or weren't taught even by my parents or grandparents. So it was really, I highly suggest it for people that are interested in knowing
the war against all Puerto Ricans, huh?
I have to read that also, but I have heard a good deal about it. And I also, on that same note, I recommend the La Brega podcast by Futuro Studios, which I've listened to, and we had Julio up here to talk about from Futuro Studios, which is a 7-part series on basically the history of Puerto Rico and how it's been colonized and where it's at now, et cetera, et cetera. So both those things.
Colin Kaepernick.
Women's boxing.
Puerto Rico.
Speaking of creative director, because we mentioned that earlier, WSLAM. So I remember, because when I was doing some freelancing on Slam, this was 2019, 2020, I remember WSLAM. This is when it started to pop up on my feed all the time. And I was probably one of the early followers. Like, I remember when it didn't even have 10K followers. I've been following it for a minute. Yeah. And I just remember it sort of popping up or whatever. And then to how this podcast came together, you were on some sort of panel or whatever that popped up on my feed. And then I clicked on you and then the other person, I forget who it was, forgive me, but whatever. And this was like the bat signal, Dex. You're going to laugh when I say this. But clicked on Camille's profile, read whatever, Florida State alum, creative director, WSLAM. I was like, oh shit, I know WSLAM. Puerto Rican flag. I was like, oh, what? Like,
you're like,
I was like,
wait, was it shock because there was a Puerto Rican creative director? Because I would understand that. A shock would be understandable to me in this space.
Listen, and look, Slam is one of the places like that I've done work with that I've actually really enjoyed, right? And we've talked about that. We've picked them up here on this podcast, but a lot of places are not going to have the balls to take a chance on somebody with that background, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was very important to see. But Camille, just when did you get the idea for sort of creating WSLAM and pushing that forward? Because I had heard an interview recently, and I'm gonna bring this to wrestling. Sorry, Dex. Tony Khan is the person in charge of AEW. They had asked him about like, hey, like, how did you come up with this idea? And he's like, I've been formulating this in my head for like 10 or so years already. It just happened to be the time. So was this something that you had always envisioned, in this space for like 10, 12 years or as long as you can remember? Or did this just come out, be like, yo, we need something like this for our culture, for women in particular, in basketball, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was an interesting transition, right? Because like I was technically at my first gig out of college, right? Like I'm in grad school, so I had done some jobs, but nothing that's like, this is your money, this is how you're living, this is everything. And that was at the WNBA, and I was working on their social team. And while I was there, I was really fortunate that unlike the NBA side, there's a lot of freedom there to really use my vision, right? Yes, there's a lot of red tape. You still have to get things approved, but they were really open in letting me kind of try out, what I thought. And as with that freedom, I started formulating this vision for what I feel like women's basketball coverage should look like. Unfortunately, that, at the league itself is not the place for it. If I'm honest, more because the league itself is just about celebrating the game, and that's what they are meant to do. And everyone else is meant to do the rest. That the same way the NBA is. The NBA doesn't do, the NBA focuses on the game itself and lets everyone do the rest.
It's a PR arm, basically.
Exactly. And so I hadn't thought about leaving the NBA, the WNBA, if I'm honest. I was like, you know what, I have a voice here. I'm in front of the real key decision makers. I'm able to, push things forward. And Adam Figman found me through actually an interesting connection that I had worked with someone at the NBA, was friends with the founder of League Fits. And they knew they wanted to do a women's basketball brand. They knew they wanted to do that. So I think they were really looking for the right person to implement it. So it was funny because it's like, it wasn't something that I'd been thinking of forever, but they thought of it. And I had already been thinking about my own vision. And so it kind of came together at one time, at one period, because it's like, hey, we don't want to tell you what to do, but we are going to give you the platform to do whatever you want to do without all the red tape of the WNBA and all those things. So it was really a fortuitous moment, I would say, just because it allowed my vision, like that was brewing so many ideas that I couldn't do, that I was like itching to do. And then, this was the platform to be able to do them. And not only that, but I know the history Slam has in basketball. I mean, I have had magazines from way back when, and I knew the hold and how cemented it was in the basketball world, and how authentic it was too. And I really appreciated that about it. And I think for me, I always wanted to connect, especially when I was at the league, art and basketball. And, that's exactly what Slam has always done. So it was just a perfect, blessing in disguise, like something that came out of the blue, but, a perfect match for me to be at and help grow this brand now.
How much did you think about, Camille, when you got this opportunity that I'm the person stepping into this, I'm the creative director, I'm a woman of color, I'm a Hispanic woman, I'm a Puerto Rican woman doing this? I think sometimes when you're the first doing something, especially stepping into space, it doesn't really grab you in that way until you sit back later and look at it. And I'm sure now you've had some time to look at it, but just what were your thoughts about that, being the first person doing this, being a woman of color, particularly a Puerto Rican woman in this space? I'm sure there's a lot of pride in that, because you said that's how Puerto Rican people feel about things, trying to master short energy.
We're very prideful. We're extremely prideful.
Extremely
that's
prideful
with the island, for real.
Yeah, and I think in all that, I would assume there has to be a great deal of pride in what you're doing. You're hearing it from other people. You hear how Bryan bigs you up on this. Just what are your thoughts about that? About, being the first creative director and being a Puerto Rican woman doing this?
It's funny. I didn't think I was ready. I actually turned down the job the first time.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
More because I was so nervous. One, I didn't play the game myself. So I felt like, you know what, maybe this is better fit for someone that's, honestly more, not authentic, because I am authentically cemented in basketball and women's basketball. That's not it. It's just more of like, someone that lived it. So I was like, you know what, maybe this isn't for me. Like, I don't know if this is right. So I turned it down. And I think it was also a little bit of fear that kind of, caused me to do that. Luckily, I had some really great friends around me. And not only that, but SLAM, kept pushing. And even though I turned them down, they came back and said, okay, well, listen, what do you need to do to make it work?
Wow.
And I had some really great friends around me saying, Camille, like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and really reminding me. I'll never forget. I was at Red Lobster in Times Square, just gotten off the bus, or my friend had just gotten off the bus from Port Authority because she works in Secaucus. And we went to Red Lobster, and I'm sitting there like, yo, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know if this is right. And she's like, yo, like, she literally shook me. She's like, if you don't do this, like, you are going to look back in 5 years and be mad at yourself. And so eating those dope ass biscuits that we all love from Red Lobster.
Can we pause for 1 second? And Greg, bring the camera back here. Camille,
Yeah.
what do I have right here?
Yo,
this is a Cheddar Bay biscuit. A Red Lobster cheddar. I literally was eating one right before the podcast started, a Cheddar Bay biscuit. So it could not have been more perfect. Red Lobster. We ain't going to talk too much because Red Lobster's not giving us money for this segment. So we're going to talk about that too much longer.
We don't got to talk about it. But anyway.
The biscuits are dope. Yes.
Yeah, very good biscuits.
Give us money for this segment. Feel free. Look, we're open for. We're free agents. We're free agents, Dex. We're open for business.
We're open for business. Sorry, Camille. I had to do that once you said about the biscuits. Go ahead.
No, but yeah, it was just one of those things that the weight of it really weighed on me more than I think. Like I think like now looking back, I realize it, because like I wouldn't have turned that down in my right mind now, but it's just then it's like you feel the weight of everything, right? And I knew stepping in, it was an extremely important role, and I took it seriously from day one. Like I lived, breathed, and ate, slept WSLAM for basically until we hit our 100,000 followers, our first 100,000. And from there I started, trying to have a life a little bit. But no, it was definitely something that I took with seriousness day one, and have since. And because I know how much the space is lacking this type of coverage, and how much this type of coverage helps games grow. You look at the NBA, people are not only attached to the game itself now, it's, oh, what's someone wearing in the tunnel? Oh, what's someone listening to? Oh, what rapper is this person with? So there is, it's like it is. And that's how you draw in audiences that may not be basketball fans. Because here's the thing, when you talk about women's basketball, for the most part, if you're a true hooper, you like women's basketball. Like if you're a real basketball lover, but you know that the purest form of basketball is women's basketball. So you love it and you respect it and you appreciate that game. And so the basketball community was never the one I was, reaching for, which yes, we got them. That was always going to be. And also, mind you, SLAM has covered women's basketball since the early days. I mean, Shamika Holdsclaw was on the cover in '98.
I remember that.
I mean, there's punk sections with Tina Charles, with Candace Parker. You looking all the way back and there's coverage. So there's always been coverage. But I knew that stepping into this, I had to, take it to that next level and really try and attract new audiences. And that's been the goal, and finding ways to, connect these humans and well-rounded individuals with fans across the world. So the weight of it definitely was hard at the beginning, but I feel like I've learned to manage it.
I had to ask.
Time is gone.
I had to ask this too, Camille, because I think one of the things about SLAM and the brand of SLAM in general, I think a lot of people would agree with is, people remember these iconic covers, right? The covers are what draws people out. So now you coming in as creative director, I have to imagine some of the pressure was, these covers got to be dope. We got to have these covers with these women looking real dope, right? And how much, because just for people to understand what you do as creative director, how much thought and input goes into what we see when we look at WSLAM, whether online or physical, just how much thought of the presentation of everything and the pressure that goes into that.
Definitely. I think, and when I arrived, mind you, they were still doing one women's cover a year. It was, they had done Maya Moore the year prior to me joining. And then the year I joined, they hadn't done one yet. And I knew right then and there we had to get out of that cycle. We can't be in this one a year mindset, first of all. So I knew that pressure was on. I went into my first cover shoot was with Liz Cambage and Asia Wilson, basically blind. They were like, yeah, here's a shooter. You got the photographer, Atiba Johnson, who's shot over 90 covers now of Slam. He's like the OG of the OG. Thank God he was there, because if I had to like fully creative direct the shoot, I don't know how it would have gone. I'd never done anything like that. And he was just phenomenal, and Asian lizards incredible themselves. But yeah, I knew in the beginning it was going to be. So a lot of my first experience, especially with that first cover, came in design work and working with our art director, Lester Padilla, who's incredible. And Susan Price Thomas, who kind of heads up she's the managing editor of the magazine, really working closely with everyone. Dennis Page, who's an icon of Slam, and working with everyone to find ways to, not only make these covers like, here's someone in a uniform, which sometimes kind of turns into what it is on the NBA side, because you get 5 to 10 minutes and you get the shot and you're good, into really like real pieces. And so now it's definitely developed. I think we still were in that uniform mentality. We've started styling. We've started really thinking creatively about these covers, going into the shoots and going out of the shoots and what the story is we're trying to tell. But yeah, it's definitely something that that pressure is hard. And I think we've made a lot of changes. There's more to come. But I'm really excited about the work we've done thus far.
And the first ever WSLAM magazine.
Yes,
like
I have entire
magazine, which I believe you tweeted out sold out in 24 hours or something crazy like that. Like it's a fantastic cover.
Thank
Diamond
you.
DeShields, Enrique Ngumbuwale, and Betnija Laney
on
the front. And like when I saw that, I was like, oh, this is an enormous step, because it's an entire it's Slam being like, all right, look, we're gonna do an entire magazine.
Yep.
Based off of not just women in basketball, but also the brand of WSLAM, and it makes a lot of sense. And WSLAM doesn't just cover like the pros either, because this is where I've first seen like Haley Van Lith, Paige Beckers, like I've seen them all on like WSLAM first, and then eventually it goes onto the Slam High School page, and then the Slam, the big Slam page. Like there's a progression system sort of there, but the first cover, like tell us about the process of that. Because I know you've been very busy with that over the last several weeks, and probably even longer than that.
Definitely. I think I knew I wanted to do this. I wanted to be careful and not do it like every other Slam issue. I knew this was special in itself. So, when we started ideating what this would look like, my big concept I wanted to be the through line is, all right, we've had 25 years of WNBA success, the longest withstanding women's professional basketball league in the world. And so how do we pay tribute to the 25 years and the hundreds of women that have played in the league in those years, while looking forward to the next 25? And Betnija, Diamond, and Enrique kind of, in their own respective ways, represent, I would say, the next 25 years of faces we're going to be seeing, of superstars, right? Betnija is a player that basically was told all you're going to be is this defensive stopper, was waived, picked up, waived. And then look at her now. She led the league in scoring last year. And then this year is, the first option in New York City. That's not an easy task. Diamond represents a player whose journey, she was a superstar in high school, right? She's on that social media wave. So is Enrique. And so her journey has been really beautiful to watch. And I don't think it's even over yet at all. But that, she's had a career that, she's coming into Chicago and finding her way, right? But also she's such an influential person in the fashion space, which is what I loved so much about the draw for her. She's starting to style herself. And I think that's something so special. And Enrique is Enrique. She's a bucket. She's a Kobe disciple. We saw her hit those 2 shots at Notre Dame. We've seen her do what she does. And so I think, again, they just represent the next chapter. And so when we talked about, not only these 3 women, it's how do we style it? I wanted it to look like a TLC album cover. Like that was my give me the food, give me the Fugees, give me TLC, give me it needs to look like an album cover,
Yeah.
And so when I talked to Chloe Jackson, who's a 2019 NCAA champion with Baylor, former WNBA player, she actually retired to go full-time styling. She styled this, and we talked a lot of denim. She was incredible. She did her thing. And then Raven B. Verona, who just shot the Met Gala, the VMAs, Teen Vogue cover with Natalia Bryant. I knew she was a superstar. She's Beyonce and Jay-Z's former tour photographer, I'm pretty sure. She's just killer. And the first woman of color to shoot a cover for us. So it was a really special shoot through and through. And really, I wanted to make every piece of this matter. And so, I think that was the big vision we had going into it. And then afterwards, Lester Padilla, again, did his incredible work on the artwork. We went with this, album cover, lovers and friends announcement type of old school vibe. And he went crazy on that. So, everyone who was a part of this project, it was what made it so great. So it was really, really fun putting it together.
See, I love hearing that. I love hearing the thought process behind it, Camille, and how you were trying to hit different things. I think you guys really nailed it with that cover for sure. What's up, listeners and supporters of the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast? We need some help from you, and it won't take up too much of your time. As we grow, we always want to hear your feedback, so take a minute or two to fill out a short anonymous survey. The survey link is right in the episode notes for this podcast. It's easy and takes less than 5 minutes. As always, we thank you for your continued support. But just to bring it back to Hispanic Heritage Month, just in terms of whether it's sports media or anything, what do you think that people can do better to commemorate Hispanic Heritage Month? It seems like sometimes, I know for our proud Hispanic brothers and sisters, they're out there doing it, but more people need to embrace it and talk about that, as we are trying to do on this podcast. What do you think people can, do better in this country from all backgrounds to commemorate Hispanic Heritage Month?
Yeah, it's funny because I work really closely with an organization called SEEN, the Sports Equity Entertainment Network, Sports and Entertainment Equity Network, which is all about raising, uplifting, and connecting Black and Brown voices in the sports and entertainment world. And when they approached me about, what should we do with Hispanic Heritage Month, I think the biggest thing for me was, for everyone to do is really educate themselves on the meaning of Hispanic versus Latinx. I think there's a big misconception, or there's just a blurred line. When you're talking about Hispanic people, it's people from Hispanic-speaking countries, and that's pretty much the general statement of that. When you're talking about Latinx, you're talking about people from colonized countries that speak Spanish, that come from Spanish-speaking countries like Spain and the European countries over there. So there's a big difference there that I think matters when you're speaking to different people from these countries. And so I think that's the biggest way to commemorate any holiday, right? Any Heritage Month. When it comes to Black History Month, to Hispanic all I ask for everyone to do is really use that time to educate yourself. Find content that really, maybe allows you to learn something that you didn't know before, respective to those communities. Because in the end, everything that, matters is really about understanding other people and understanding different backgrounds. And that's how we develop empathy for people, for, situations that we just don't necessarily understand. So I think that's the best way really for people to commemorate the month.
I love that. I love that answer there. It was great, because sometimes I feel like people do not understand the diversity among even different minority groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
This even happens in the Black community, where sometimes, it's just, we are all Black, but, you have people from Africa of that descent, straight. You have people like myself who are of Caribbean background and descent, and our producer, Greg. So there's so much diversity, just like you said, between the Hispanic and Latinx communities. there's so much diversity there, and we can do a better job of all of understanding that. So that was well said. You got great answers, Camille.
Thank
you got great answers. You're right. Brian was right. Brian was right. Brian's right. Go ahead, B. Go ahead, B.
Yeah, and then I was gonna like go back to the whole, WSLAM cover real quick also because like you're making history in real time. And I don't know if you get to stop and think about those kind of things, but this is stuff that Dexter and I talked about because like Dexter's had experience being the only Black reporter at like a national network. I've had experience being the only Latino in the room at a national, for example, when I was doing TV on MSG networks, there ain't nobody that looked like me that was doing that. It was like me, Bill Pito, insert other people here, all cool, but like at the same time, like to do that and to be very young doing it is two very different. It's two very things that you should be proud of, basically.
Appreciate that.
So for you, just like, do you ever get to stop and think about that? Because I know you said you're able to take a breath now for a couple of days, but you're gonna have to get right back into it, work on another cover at some point.
Yeah, I don't think it hit me until I saw the magazine in person for the first time. That was literally when I got home from vacation on Sunday. I like came home to it. I was like, oh my God, I helped make this. I think weirdly for me, sometimes I think if I think about it a little too much, it distracts me and I think inhibits my creative because the pressure it gets to me a little bit. I'm very much an open, I struggle with anxiety and depression. I'm very open about mental health.
Yeah.
And so for someone like me, I have to find a way to compartmentalize a little bit. Otherwise I won't be able to like get the job in front of me done. And so I think it was like at the very end when I started realizing, wow, like making history in real time. And that's when I really started to like congratulate myself. I think the whole process, I'm like, it wasn't good enough. It was this good enough. Like, I'm sure we could have done this instead of that. Cause like, you start going through your head, all the different ways and all the different things you could have done. And again, that's why I try not to think about the pressure too much. So I don't allow myself to I got to talk myself off a ledge sometimes. That's, what creatives do, unfortunately.
But that's real, Greg, if you don't mind, like giving us everybody on the screen, but that's real because we all have experience with that. Like we've all like in this room, Camille, because you probably don't know about our backgrounds like that, but Dexter could speak for himself because I mean, Dexter obviously knows Dexter better, but I know for me, like I've done a lot of different creative things, including which we've promoted on this podcast, Hidalgo Heights, a fiction novel that I wrote during the pandemic. And the reason why I relate a lot to what you said is because, especially when you're doing things when you can be lonely in a lot of these moments, because you're working with a team, but for some projects, like when you're coming up with the idea, where you're coming up with different concepts, especially now when you're in isolation, a lot of it can just be like who can I sort of bounce something off of? And it's like, if it's your call, you're the only person that you have to rely on in that moment. And that can be really tough, especially in my case, if you're writing something. That can be really tough, but I mean, I totally feel you on that because it's very, very difficult. And creatives are people that I've thought about during this pandemic because it's because I know from experience, Dexter knows from experience, and obviously you know from experience, like shit is hard. Shit is hard to really push through your ideas and try to find time to do that and, really remain focused.
I think the one thing you said, Camille, where I can relate to too, and I hear you on that, where sometimes thinking about where you are in something in the space can bring on a lot of anxiety. And it's managing that and expectations. I think it is good to look back and sometimes say, oh man, this is what I've accomplished, especially when you're the first. And I hear you about when you're in it, you don't even realize it till you have a chance. You just talked about coming back from vacation and then sitting back and being like, oh, I just did this. But then it does sit on you as a creative and you're like, I could have done this better. I hear you on all of that. Like I'm so with you on it. But I do think at the same time, it's important to reflect and give yourself the flowers, but also, allow people like us, we're giving you the flowers.
Thank you.
As a woman of color, doing what you're doing in the position that you are, it is huge. Even if you didn't know it. And shout out to your friend over the Cheddar Bay biscuits.
Shout out Rena.
Shout out to Rena. Shout out to Rena.
My girl, the one at Red Lobster, she literally texted me. She goes, "Pull up to Red Lobster at Times Square right now," and the rest is history. So
let's give Rena the flowers too, because she's like, look, girl, you need to get this done. Yeah. And you listen, you listen to your friend, and as kudos to that too, because we're all in those spaces. And I'm really happy you shared that story with the audience, because I think it's important for us as people of color in sports media to understand that there are times we sometimes have doubt. We might not think that we're ready, but we mean so much for what we're doing to a lot of other people. And like, just even hearing you say this, I want to let you know, Camille, you mean a lot to me. Just hearing you that, it's inspiring. I'm sure Bryan feels the same, and other people who are listening. So, we're definitely inspired. So please keep doing it. But I guess the last thing we'll ask you before we let you get out of here is, how do you feel about where things stand in terms of representation for women, particularly women of color in sports media, right? Because we still got some ways to go. There's not a lot of Camille's, there's not a lot of Dexters, there's not a lot of Bryans out there still in the spaces that need be. Where do you think things stand? How much more work do you feel like needs to be done?
Yeah, I mean, let me first start by talking about Puerto Rico in itself.
Sure.
Because I think the hardest thing with a lot of, family friends or people that I know through people is the lack of, not necessarily, it's like the knowledge of opportunity, right?
Yes.
Like it's not even the.
You're gonna trigger me, Camille.
I know there's a lack of opportunity. I know that, but it's the lack of knowledge of opportunity, right? And in Puerto Rico, basketball's always been had such a strong foothold in the country. I mean, you have their biggest artist owning a basketball team there, and it's very well known.
NBA players go to play there all the time.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, 100%. And but women's basketball specifically has recently started growing in Puerto Rico, right? Mm-hmm. So they just made their first Olympics ever.
Yep.
This is the first team they've ever sent to the Olympics, which is incredible. But, I think especially in the smaller Caribbean places and islands, there's a lack of knowledge of opportunity and understanding that this is an opportunity this is a career path, right? I thought I was going to be a doctor. Like you get taught 5 career paths, right? Like a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, like you know what I'm saying? And so
especially from people of color, like 100%. Our families, because our families are like, look, we came to America, but we want you to have the stability or whatever. Like trying to, even to this day, explaining to my parents, look, I left this job because this motherfucker was wilding, et cetera, and all this shit. Like it's hard. It's hard for them to be like, wait, you can't just quit or whatever. I've worked a job I've hated for mad long, whatever. And then it gets into that whole thing. Like people don't understand how difficult and really how triggering it can be for somebody coming from a Black family, a Latino family, et cetera, et cetera. So continue.
Exactly. And it's funny because like to this day, my mom, my dad, like I don't think they know what I do. Like I just send them the bullshit. I'm like, here, look, I was on ESPN, like enjoy. They don't know. They enjoy it. But I guess, I think that's one area that really I think needs work. And then definitely we have to start lifting each other up on the way up, right? Like, let's be honest. My generation is the first wave of women that are really in the positions they are right now. I wouldn't even say the past. Yeah, the past had them in the boardroom and some, but like from a media perspective, it wasn't there. I grew up, and I love her, but don't get me, like I grew up watching Sam Ponder on College Game Day. Incredible analyst, but where's the representation there? Having them go to Maria Taylor was like a blessing. I was so happy for that. But I think that's where we need to start shifting the narrative, and I'm seeing it happen because the public's forcing it to happen, not because these companies are making the proactive decisions to make it happen. So I think that's the biggest areas, when it comes to knowledge of opportunity and then creating the opportunity and lifting each other up along the way. Because, we're all in this fight together. We're all in this, we're all rowing the same direction, especially when it comes to women's basketball. So that's really what it's all about.
No, that was beautifully said. Knowledge of opportunity is so key. As somebody who is a descendant of someone from a small Caribbean island, I know that all too well. And a lot of people just the knowledge of opportunity that we are just not aware of. Camille, we have to say again, thank you. We're giving you all the flowers. We wish you much continued success, and we'd love to have you back on here because we know one thing for sure. there are going to be dope covers to come. You and Bryan are going to keep the same Puerto Rican short energy. That is still going to be there. And we need more of that on this podcast.
Hey, I got my inches. I got my inches.
See, Bryan, I don't know when Bryan stopped growing the way he didn't get his
16
inches.
years old, and I was pissed.
That's
I was on varsity. I was a starting point guard, and I thought I was gonna get to at least like 5'10", 175. I was like I was signing up for a recruiting page thing, like NCSA had to put the profile there. I had
which you showed me the page of.
Yeah, I had cornrows, Camille. You know what I mean? I had cornrows. I was looking like Chino XL, except mad smaller. And it wasn't. It's not easy, even when you're at like a Class B school, to be a 5'7", 150-pound starting point guard. So
not easy at all. But both of you guys, you know, you have
most 4-point plays in school history and third in assists in a season ever.
See, he remembers that.
Flowers,
Look,
pass for point guard. You know, Patrick Beverly defense. I was an antagonist.
There you go. Well, Camille, please continue the great work, like we said, and like we said, we love you back. Please keep up. We're going to be watching everything you're doing. WSLAM, for those who don't know, go give them a follow.
Yes.
Go pick up the latest copy when you can, and follow Camille for all her work and everything WSLAM is doing. Camille, blessings, sister.
You guys. I'll be back soon. All right. Thank y'all.
Yes,
no doubt.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
One time for your mom, one time. One time for your mom, one time.
Well, I haven't done One Time for Your Mind in a while, but we are back here to talk about some interesting things that we like or things that are going on in the world. I have found a little YouTube series that I've become a fan of around one of my favorite producers. And Bryan, you know, he's always got something for you. Always got something interesting. Bryan, what you got today for One Time for Your Mind?
For those of you who know, may have been following me, there was a little bit of transactional news on my feed shared earlier this week that I left the website I was writing at, and when I did that, I became as happy as I did in months. But I'm only one of millions of people who have done this nationwide over the course of 2021 for what people are calling the Great Resignation, which actually even has its own Wikipedia page. It's basically people quitting their jobs because of any number of reasons, and we're seeing more reporting and more studies on that. So I wanted to pass along a couple of updates that I found very interesting, because I know from talking to a lot of people that there are mental health reasons being, you know, sort of one of the leading factors in this. Caring about work-life balance, et cetera, that they're not getting from their companies. So people have just been saving enough so that they can do this, either take some time off or find a better job, et cetera, and you know, it's a different time now. So I saw the study from shrm.org. Sorry, because I almost butchered that. Basically, on their study, who's thinking of leaving, it says younger workers, including millennials, which would apply to me and Dexter, because Dexter's right at the right. Dex, you're right at the.
I am an older millennial, you can say.
Yeah,
yes.
Including millennials and Generation Zers are more likely than Generation X and baby boomers to say they're actively searching for a new job right now, according to research. Additionally, Black and Hispanic workers are more likely than white workers to say they're actively looking for new employment opportunities. And this means, the gentleman Alonzo, I'm forgetting his title, but he says this means our inclusion efforts are not as effective as we thought, which I found very interesting. And then the most common responses that employees give for jumping ship: better compensation, cited by 53% of the respondents, which, you know, more pay enables people to do the things they love outside of work, et cetera, which, you know, that's the point, right? You don't want one source of income, but you also don't want to be strapped down to just one thing, because this goes to the next point: better work-life balance, 42%. This option specifically excluded remote work, which is only available to 47% of the workforce right now, which is lower than I thought, Dex. I did want to point that out. And then a bunch of other people, smaller numbers, but, you know, significant numbers still. You're seeing 36% better benefits, 33% career advancement opportunities, 33% desire to make a career change, called COVID clarity, Alonzo noted, explaining that some people became more aware of what they really want out of a job and in their lives as a result of the pandemic. So for me personally, pretty much all of that applies. And for a lot of other people, I think multiple of those things apply, not, you know, one one more than the other, perhaps, but I think it's more of a ranking system than just choosing one of those things. So really, I think people should be aware of that. And I encourage people, like, do what's best for you. Like, I think the way, because we've talked about a lot on this podcast, digital media in particular and sports media, what we know, the industry sucks. And there are very few full-time jobs out there. And people have this mentality that just because there are full-time jobs available that you need to sit there and take it. And it's like, no, we don't. And if we have that mentality that, look, a job is a job, then we're not going to get nowhere as a digital media industry, as a sports media industry, and as a world, really, if we're just settling for less and just taking shit just because it's stable and just because it's a job. And it's not fair to the workers, to the workforce, et cetera, et cetera. So people need to do what's best for them and not have this mentality of just accepting less. So if you can and you have the means and you want to make that decision, I encourage you to do so if you decide that it's best for you, because a lot of other people are doing the same. And at the end of the day, and this is something that Dexter tells me when we have these long conversations about this stuff, you figure it out. You just figure it out. Sometimes you just jump. You know, it's good to have a plan, but sometimes you can't even have time to do that. You just figure it out. And if you really want to make something work out, it'll work itself out.
All true. All well, and more people are doing this. I've known quite a couple people who've left their jobs within the last year for all the reasons that Bryan mentioned there. Real quick, I have been enjoying a recent new web series, I guess you would say, that I thought came about from a place I didn't think would come. But for many people who know me as a hip hop fan, DJ Premier is probably my favorite producer, definitely my favorite hip hop producer out there. And he has started a new series on his YouTube channel called So What's Up. And I really encourage you, if you are a fan of hip hop, particularly if you're a fan of, with Primo, that boom bap hip hop, early 90s hip hop, East Coast, you're going to want to watch this. What Premier does in this series is he talks a bit about the ideas and construction of different beats he made for songs for different artists. So there's one on MCs Act Like They Don't Know, KRS-One, or there's one on Represent by Nas, which is a really good one with an interesting story about how there was also an alternate version of the song, which I didn't even know about. And I'm a huge Nas fan and Illmatic head and didn't even know about this. But there's a lot of stories behind these productions. And he really shows also about how everything was done before digital and on the analog side. And so a lot of this, and every time he shows you one of the beats, he's loading it up from a floppy disk. Yes, the young kids probably even know what a floppy disk was, but this is what you had to store media on, that you inserted into your computer back into the day. And it was everything for everybody, including producers. So all these stories around how they got everything to get onto this floppy disk and produce this beat. And you just learn a lot about the timing, the stories behind the beats with the artist, working with the artist, and everything like that. So there's some really good ones. There's 7 episodes at the time we were recording this that is out right now. Some really good. They're very short watches. I think the longest one is 8 minutes and 30 seconds or so. That's the Nas Represent episode. So if you're really a fan of hip hop, specifically if you are a fan of Primo and that sound of beats from the early 90s like I am, then this is one to watch. But salute to Primo for doing this, because he hasn't always talked a lot about his style and how he did everything. And he hasn't always showed everybody, like he's talked about how he's very secretive about showing how he does his scratching for the hooks and everything. And he doesn't really get into that on here. But the fact that he's just pulling back the curtain a little bit on some of the stories around these artists and these beats that are just so legendary is great. And Primo's got so many. He can do so many of these. I don't even know when he's going to stop. There's ones I really want him to do that I haven't even heard him touch on yet, that are just some of my favorites. So I'm really intrigued to see what he does on this a lot. That's so good. I think there's other ones who go with Nas and Jay and different artists, Guru, obviously from Gangstar. So there's just going to be so much that can be done. So salute to the legend Primo for doing this. I'm looking forward to more. I'm really enjoying it. I love when we get these kind of things in hip hop and it's really short, digestible content. So salute to him and his team for putting this out, because I found it really, really dope. And I've just thoroughly enjoyed it, for all. So I know, Bryan, you haven't checked it out yet. Please.
I'm going to. I'm definitely going to.
Check it out. I think you're going to like it. I would even say for you to start with that Nas Represent one, because I think you'll find that rather interesting for sure. But that's all the time we have for this episode. 193. We are almost near 200, which makes Bryan smile. Of the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast. Special shout out.
Come with it, networks. Come with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, we out here.
Special shout out to our guests.
But don't lowball us either, because we've dealt with that shit multiple times.
I don't deal with lowballing at all whatsoever. Special shout out to our guest, Camille Buxeda, who joined us from WSLAM Creative Director. That was a fantastic conversation that we had with her, and we look forward to having her on again. As usual, please continue to support us in the ways you do. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook as well. We love your support. We love the continued support as we now are in our 4th season, whatever you want to call it, of this podcast. But for episode 193, he's Bryan Fonseca. I'm Dexter Henry. Until next time, y'all. Peace.